Welcome to VW 7.5. Today we're going to start by talking about periodic properties of trig functions. So first, just write this down in your notes here. It says sine of theta plus 2 pi k is sine theta. So a bunch of you might be wondering, what is this k here? Hopefully you talked about that a little bit in Algebra 2. This k refers to any integer, which means this 2 pi k is referring to multiples of 2 pi, which means you can add any multiple of 2 pi to theta, or subtract, because k could be negative, and it won't actually change the value of the function. So a very similar idea to coterminal. And notice how sine and cosine are 2 pi. For tangent, it's only pi. And that's because for tangent, the period is shorter. If you look at our table from last time, the tan values repeat every 180 degrees rather than every 360. So we can use that here, and actually we have been using this idea already. Sine of 420, we can just subtract 360, that's sine of 60. Hopefully we're at a point where we can just look at that and think that is root 3 over 2. Tan of 5 pi over 4. So notice how we could subtract pi, and that's the same as tan of pi over 4. That's right there, positive 1. Cosine 11 pi over 4, let's subtract 2 pi. So that's cosine of 3 pi over 4. That's the middle tick mark in the second quadrant, which is negative root 2 over 2. So notice how really not too bad. The next is using even-odd properties. So in Algebra 2a, you should have talked about even and odd functions. So to refresh your memory, an even function, it's essentially y-axis symmetry, but in trig we use the algebraic definition more. It's f of negative x is equal to f of x. And for odd, we say f of negative x is equal to negative f of x. And the trig functions actually fall in line with this. We say cosine is an even function, and sine is an odd function, and tangent is also an odd function. Now, if you're wondering why that is, let's draw a circle here. The reason is quite simple. If this is theta, and this is xy, let's use negative theta. Negative theta just means rotate the other direction going down. And look at the coordinate here. If the angle is the same, it's just negative instead of positive. So again, I should make that more clear. That's negative theta. The x value remains the same, and y became negative. So look at that. X stayed the same, which means cosine should not change. But look at the y values. The y values change, which means sine should change, and the tan values are also going to change. They negate. That's why even is, or cosine is an even function, and sine and tan are odd functions. So for these next couple, we're going to use these properties to really help us figure it out. Sine is odd, which means I can just take this negative out like that. It's negative sine 45. Negative sine 45, let's think about that. Quadrant 1 in the middle, root 2 over 2. Negative root 2 over 2. Even's the best one, because if it's even, you just ignore it. That's cosine pi. That is negative 1. Cotan. So cotan is not on the chart, but if tan is odd, cotan is also odd. So that's true for secant and cosecant. Secant is even, cosecant is also odd. Let's take the negative out. Negative cotan of 3 pi over 2. Cotan of 3 pi over 2. This is an interesting one because tangent is undefined there, and undefined is 1 over 0. And if you flip that, it becomes 0 over 1, which means it does become defined. So this is actually 0. And this last one, let's take that negative out. We got to do a couple of things here. 37 pi over 4 is still not a nice number, but we learned earlier, if we look back up here, I can add or subtract multiples of pi freely. So I'm just going to take out 9 pi, or 36 pi over 4. And now I have negative 10 pi over 4. That's easy, that's just negative 1. So now we're going to use those examples on some advanced problems. So f is cosine, f of a is a quarter. So what's f of negative a? Well, cosine is even, which means f of negative a is f of a. F of a is a quarter. Done. Okay, so now I have f of a, that's a quarter. If you add 2 pi, it doesn't matter. Minus 2 pi doesn't matter. So just keep adding a quarter. The answer is 3 over 4. Next one. Cotan, well, that's odd. So this would mean take the negative out. That's negative f of a. F of a is negative 3, so that's negative 3. The answer is 3. Now I look at f of a again, so I know that's negative 3. If you add pi, so remember, tan and cotan at the very top here, if you add pi, it doesn't matter. So we're just going to get rid of this, get rid of the 4 pi. So really it's just negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3. That's your answer, negative 9. And we're done.